What's up, brothers? I can't see you guys, but hopefully you can see me. I'd love to get more questions from you guys because I'm gonna try to. Guys, but hopefully you can see me. So I'm hearing an echo on my end. Um, yeah, I want to get questions from you guys so I can answer as many questions as possible during this session. And that's probably the best way to do it rather than me giving you a presentation. So if you can type in your questions wherever you're watching this at, just type in your questions in the chat, and Jose will make sure I get those questions. Cool. You guys should be able to see my screen. These are just the questions that I received in the group. So these are the questions I'm going to address, and hopefully you guys write more questions in. So the questions are: is there a way to assess the risk and reward of a short-term rental versus long-term? Are there any tools to estimate occupancy rate and come up with nightly rates? What are some costs that aren't obvious? And if I can walk you through an example of a property. So I'm going to do all of that. But let's give it another minute or two. Hopefully you guys have some more questions. Cool. Well, if no questions, let me ask you a question. For those who are on, and I'm not quite sure how many are already on, but what are you looking to do, and why are you interested in this session? What are you looking to do, as far as your investments, more specifically short-term rentals, and why are you interested in this session? Is there a specific piece of information you're trying to get out? And Jose, if you can, okay, cool. Okay, purchasing a condo or a townhouse for Airbnb. All right, I'm gonna add that in here. I'm gonna put STR, which stands for short-term rentals. What Airbnb is? Airbnb is really just an advertising site for properties. Any more questions or comments, guys? All right. So I'm going to run down these questions real quick. And as we go through, this information, please feel free to ask more questions, things to come top of mind. or maybe some clarifying questions on things that I mentioned. So is there a way to assess the risk and the reward of short-term rentals, Airbnb versus long-term rentals? So I'm going to talk about really quick the rewards and the risk with short-term rentals. The reward, very big reward, is really the revenue. Short-term rentals probably have maybe the highest form of revenue when it comes to rental properties. Definitely a lot more revenue than long-term rentals. So one of the big reward, and probably one of the reasons why a lot of people get into short-term rentals, is the amount of revenue you can make per year, even on one property. So big reward, high revenue. Another reward is it serves as a vacation home for yourself and your family. So, when it's not being rented, or sometimes you can block it out for you, your friends, and family to go vacation. I will tell you that the properties that we have haven't really been able to do that so much because they're often booked, and they're pretty much booked every weekend. So there's not really time for us to go and enjoy it unless we block it off in advance, which is a good problem to have, right? And I'd much rather rent it out and bring the income in rather than go enjoy it myself with no income. But if there's a family event coming up, or I want to take a group of people, then it's worthwhile that way. Another thing is a sellable asset, right? Just as with any property, you buy it, you rent it, somebody else is kind of picking up the costs for you along the way, then you can sell it whenever and make money on it. Especially if you are renting it, you can sell it at a very good price because you can leverage that rental income, to sell it at a great price. And some people buy based on the rental price. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. Another reward is that it's an asset you can leverage, right? If you have a property, just as with any property, you can use to get a home equity line of credit on it. You can use for income or financing to support the next loan or the next project. Another reward, and last one really quick, is that you don't have to deal with long-term tenants. You don't have to deal with evictions. You don't have to deal with things of that nature. So these are some of the rewards of short-term rental. And I think the biggest thing is the fact that it brings in high amount of revenue. The risk, and I think one of the biggest risks, and I'm not going to talk about a lot of risks because I don't think there's a lot, but the biggest risk is the regulations. So the townships and the HOAs that these properties are in, they regulate how this property can be used and cannot be used. So for example, some HOAs, homeowners associations, they restrict or they ban short-term rentals. So some communities don't allow short-term rentals, right? Some townships don't allow short-term rentals. The big risk is that if you purchase a property and you're renting it, then all of a sudden the HOA or the township decides to stop short-term rental or ban short-term rental. And that has been happening very frequently. A lot of townships, a lot of HOAs are beginning to apply regulations on short-term rental property. Some apply regulations, which is fine, but some go as far as banning it, which obviously pretty much shuts you down. And that's really the big risk, is just kind of navigating the regulations and the possibility of your property being shut down, not being able to rent. Another risk is if you are not producing rentals, then you have to absorb the costs. For example, during COVID, we were shut down for 3 months between March and June of 2020. Short-term rentals were banned. That means no one was allowed to rent their property. However, we still had mortgage payments to pay on these properties, so we pretty much absorbed the cost out of our own pocket. So that's one thing you have to account for. Now, if you're renting and if you buy it correctly, you really shouldn't have to worry about absorbing costs because it really should pay for itself. So these are some of the risks and some of the rewards that we typically see in short-term rentals. Any thoughts or clarifying questions on those things before we move on? Cool. Going once, going twice. All right. All right, number two, any tools to estimate occupancy rate and come up with nightly rates? Yes. So AirDNA, so you just spell it AIRDNA.com. That's a website that has a lot of analytics, and they're all derived from the Airbnb site mostly. So they have something called the AirDNA Rentalizer or AirDNA Airbnb calculator that you can just Google that, and from there you can basically just drop in an address, and it will show you an estimate of the yearly revenue as well as occupancy rate and nightly rate. When I actually go through the example towards the very end, I'm going to show you that, and it's a very helpful tool. Another tool you can use is Airbnb itself. So, or any booking site. When you go on the booking sites, Airbnb, for example, you can check the calendar, see how well it's booked, see what people are charging for properties in that area, or possibly the property that you're looking to buy itself is already rented. If the property that you're looking to buy is already rented, you can ask for the rental information, the rental records. So the seller or the seller's agent will supply to you the last year's rent or last 3 years rent, whatever they have on file. And you can gather your information from there. You can also look at that property itself on Airbnb and see how much it's being rented for, how well booked its calendar is, and things of that nature. All right. So again, tools are AirDNA and Airbnb site itself or other booking sites. Any questions on that? All right. What are some costs? So your costs, obviously, major costs. You have your financing. So if you have a mortgage on a property, that's a big cost. Your tax, that's another cost. Your HOA fee, and in some communities, that HOA fee can be very high. Rental permits is another cost. So some places you have to get a permit from the county and or township, and you also have to get a permit from the HOA, from the community. So those are some costs. Some HOAs, some communities also charge you per rental. For example, so for every rent booking that you get, you have to pay the HOA a certain fee. Now, what a lot of people do is just pass on that fee to the renter. Other costs that you have cleaning fees, which really add up, but that's another cost you can pass on to the renters as well. You have maintenance fees, especially if you're not there. Obviously, you need someone to shovel the snow, mow the lawn, all of that, do the landscaping. So you have all of those costs. If you have a pool, you're going to need some pool maintenance folks. If you have a hot tub, you might need the hot tub maintenance or hot tub servicing. So any property maintenance are costs. And then in addition to your bedding, so any obviously all your furniture, that's a cost. And then sheets, pillows, all of that stuff, towels, toiletries, whatever it is that you want to provide people when they come in. And a lot of this stuff you're going to have to constantly replace. Sheets, sheets get so bad you have to replace them. Towels get so bad you have to replace them. People break stuff in the house, and that's another thing you have to keep in mind is that people don't necessarily care for the house because it's not theirs, right? They think they're just kind of staying at a hotel or motel. So things break, things sometimes go missing, and you have to replace these things often. So you have to account for that, right? So these are just some of the costs that you have. Again, financing, tax, HOA fees, permit fees, maybe booking fees, and then you have your cleaning, your property maintenance, and then all of the stuff inside the house, furniture, toiletries, and everything that you provide as far as accommodations for your guests, right? Some people even go as far as providing food or a cheese tray or bottles of wine or drinks or maybe some kind of promotional passes or tickets to events in town. These are optional and they might enhance your experience. So if you choose to do that, then obviously those are costs to take into account. Any questions on any of that stuff? Going once, going twice. All right, cool. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second, then I'm gonna go into the example, okay? And this is gonna be gold for a lot of you. I know not a lot of people would be sharing this information, but I will. I'm gonna show it to you right here. By the way, as I'm kind of sharing this information, just to let you know how I came up with this information, I didn't just spend like half hour on Google searching this stuff. This comes from years of experience, years of trying to search for properties, find properties, evaluate properties, buy and sell properties for other people, and also do it for my family as well. There's a lot of people trying to teach Airbnb, even a lot of people who've done a lot less than me and make a lot less money than our properties do. But there's people charging all kinds of crazy money to teach you how to do Airbnb, and they probably won't give you as much detail as even I'm about to go through right now. So let me share my screen again, and I'm gonna go through this example. Is it up? Okay. So the screen's a little small, but I'll go through this right now. Is it still on screen? Okay. Cool. So this is a property in a community that I know rents very well. You see there it's priced at $329,000. At the very top, it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house. So I know in that community that the rental regulations allow for 2 people per bedroom plus 2 more. So at a 4-bedroom house, you can get, in this community, you can get 10 guests, right? 2 people per bedroom. That's 4. That's 8, right? Because you have 4 bedroom and then 2 more, so that's 10. Okay. You can take a look at the pictures and all of that stuff. In the details, I see at the very bottom that it says check rental history, right? So the moment I know that the property is already rented, I'm gonna go ahead and email the listing agent and ask for the rental records to see how much they made last year, the year before, however long they were renting the property. So obviously you see all of the information here in terms of the price, the number of bedrooms, the square footage, the total taxes, the HOA fees, right? All of that stuff so that you can begin doing your calculations. From here, what I would do is look at the property itself on Airbnb. If the property is being rented, I try to see if I can find it. And I did find it. It's actually right here. So this is the Airbnb listing for this exact property. You can see here it's rented at $299 a night. It has a 4.6 ratings. So I like to see what people think about this property, what they say. So you want to read the reviews. And then I like to look at the calendar itself. So how well booked is it? When I click this add date, I'll be able to see the calendar. But you see here, the calendar is very open, which tells me this property is not booked very well. That usually has to do with pricing, or maybe there's something else. I see here that there's minimum of 7-night stays, which is not typical in that area, right? We have property in that same community, and we only have a 2-night minimum, sometimes 3. So I think from my evaluation that might be a big point as to why the property is not being rented as much as it probably should. Also, sometimes the nightly rate is different when it comes to weekends, right? So that's why I always like to look at a weekend. Let's look at, and also holidays sometimes are more expensive than regular nights. So let's go over Labor Day weekend. You see here they're only booked at $299 still a night, so the rate doesn't change. But there's other fees that they're passing on to the guests: cleaning fee, service fee, occupancy, and tax fee. Okay, so this property has potential. It's probably not booking as well as it should be because I think because of the nightly minimum that it has, right? You also want to look at the features of the property, what it provides, and how it compares to other rental properties around it. And you can go through Airbnb and just kind of browse around and look to see what's out there. Okay. AirDNA is a tool that I had mentioned earlier. And what I did, I typed in the exact address for this property and I put how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms it has. You see here that AirDNA has an annual rental revenue estimate of $102,000 with an average nightly rate of $496 and an occupancy rate overall of 57%. Okay, so personally, based on my experience in that community, that nightly rate is a little high for that particular property. I don't think it can get that nightly rate on a consistent basis. Maybe during holidays or maybe if everybody else prices go up. Just like anything else, you got to be competitive, right? If you outprice your property too much and people have a ton of other options that are just the same, that provide the same features at a much lower price, why would they book your place, right? The 102,000 is based on the 496. So I think that's a little high. I wouldn't necessarily do my calculations based on that. I think I would take a more conservative approach. Probably around the $80,000 range. And that could be a little higher, but that's just based on my experience with properties in that community around that same size, right? And then you kind of want to look at all your other costs. But one of the big costs, as I said, is your mortgage. So I pulled up a mortgage calculator and I plugged in the numbers. Basically, if I was to buy this property at list price, at the current market rates, I would be looking to pay $2,000 a month, just based on mortgage, and that's including tax and insurance as well, right? So $2,000 a month, I'm spending $24,000 a year just on mortgage, okay? And I think I included HOA in here. Yep, so my HOA is included. So $24,000 a year just based on the mortgage. And then you want to add your cleaning fees, your maintenance fees. If you are getting someone to manage your property, so we manage the properties ourselves or we have family members do it. But if you're getting a management service, it's going to run you anywhere from 10, maybe up to 25% of the yearly revenue. So that's another cost to break in. And then you want to kind of have your sweet spot of how much you're looking to make per year. Again, I like to kind of plan conservatively. So 20 to 30 grand a year after paying all of the fees, after paying all of expenses, even after paying the mortgage. That's a good spot for me to be in. Obviously, the more the better. And hopefully your property outperforms what your predictions are. But you don't want to estimate too high that you're going to make so much money and you don't, because then you're going to be in a pinch paying that deficit off, right? So that's really quick, just kind of giving you an example, trying to find the property, looking at the property on Airbnb or looking at similar properties, seeing how much they go for, what their booking is like, looking at AirDNA to see what the estimates are like, then beginning to do your costs. Obviously, financing or mortgage is a big piece of that cost. Flex MLS is not a free service. That's a local MLS in the Poconos area that I subscribe to. If any of you are looking to kind of get listings from that MLS, email me, menabadros@gmail.com, or just message me on Facebook. Tell me what exactly you're looking for. I'll be happy to have a conversation with you and set up a list where you can get automatic listings from those properties. Where does that 57% come from? That's just a AirDNA estimate based on that community or the other properties in that area, right? If you were to put in another address, it would give you another number. And we can even probably look at it to see how they calculate it. The estimated percentage of days. Okay, this is just defines what it is. It doesn't tell you how they get it. But yeah, but that's how they get it. It's just based on other properties in the area. Again, AirDNA, all their data, they pull it, or at least for this page, they pull it from Airbnb, because this is really an Airbnb estimate calculator. There's a lot more tools and features inside of AirDNA that you can pay for, but just to get this basic tool and estimate, you don't have to pay for this. This is free. All right. Cool. What questions you guys have? If I went through this very quickly, let me know any questions or anything you want me to clarify or go over again. Personally, I don't pay for AirDNA. I thought about paying, but honestly, this estimate is sufficient enough. And obviously, I do my own research and kind of have some experience with some of the areas, so I know what stuff go for and how much to kind of expect and things like that. But I use this free estimate. And again, you can buy property that already have rental history, and the best, the best predictions are already the numbers it's already doing. So if there's a property already being rented, just ask for the rental history, and that's what you can probably expect to make, or even more if you make some improvements in the property itself. Right. I think short-term rentals is probably one of the most lucrative real estate investment strategies right now, simply because of the high revenue that you can make. As you guys can see here, based on this estimate, I mean, you can generate 6 figures on rent, over 100 grand in rent from one property. You're not going to do that from a multi-unit, at least not one that's going to cost you 300 grand, right? For you to generate 100 grand from a multi-unit property is going to cost you a lot more than 300 grand. So the revenue from Airbnb is very high, but there's also, it's a lot more hands-on. You have to be very involved. It's not like you get a tenant in there for a year and that's it. You're having people check in and check out every 2 to 3 days. So you have to be more hands-on, more on top of it, or have someone manage it for you, right? So that means coordinating with your cleaners, coordinating with your maintenance folks, make sure that the place is ready for your guests. Somebody said that it's kind of like operating a small motel, and I think that's a good way to put it. You're kind of operating your own bed and breakfast, and that's where Airbnb is, by the way, right? The B&B in Airbnb is bed and breakfast. So it's really operating your own bed and breakfast or your own motel. Does this cover international locations as well? Randy, I'm not sure what you mean AirDNA, if it covers international locations? I want to say yes. I think I looked at a few international locations on there before, and I got some estimates. Yep. Yeah, so good question. 10% down payment and 4% interest rate. So right now, the 10% down payment comes from if you use a second home mortgage. So if you already have a mortgage right now because you own a house and that's your primary residence, you can go and get what's called the second home loan. It's a conventional loan, and the minimum down payment requirement for a second home loan is 10%. And what classifies or what is categorized as a second home is a home that's usually within, or it has to be, depending on the company, 50 or 75 miles or more from your primary residence, and or it's a different style house. Like, so it's in a rental community, is a vacation rental, that classifies as a second home, right? So you can buy a second home using a second home loan with 10% down payment. It's not considered an investment. So the downside of that is for your DTI, you can't use the potential income that's coming in from it. But as long as your DTI doesn't need that, then you can secure it with 10% down. You can also buy it as an investment property, but then you're going to be paying 20% down. The 4% interest rate is about right now. So recently I had a second home loan close and it was 3.75%, right? I just put the 4% interest rate there just to kind of be conservative with the numbers a little bit. I like to estimate high on my costs and estimate a little low on my income. Good questions. Other questions, folks? Cool. And Jose mentioned in the chat, 3.5 to 5% right now on investment properties and second home loans. And that also depends on your credit score, right? Yeah, if you're looking to kind of look at what you would get right now as far as interest rate based on your situation, I would contact Jose and have him kind of run your file, and he can kind of tell you what you would be what you would be eligible for as far as type of loan, interest rate, down payment, and all of that stuff. Cool. What other questions you guys have? So, I mean, there's a lot of information that I can, share with you guys, but obviously I didn't necessarily want to do just a big, long presentation. I mainly wanted to answer questions you guys have. I'll probably be putting out more content on short-term rentals, whether in the group or just on my YouTube channel. So definitely, follow me and get more content and information that way. Or feel free to private message me your questions if you want, or put them on the Money Hacks group, and myself or somebody else will answer it. If it's your second home, do you use it as a business tax deduction when filing? So you don't use it as a business tax deductions. You can deduct your expenses from it, and you can definitely use the depreciation. Depreciation, that's probably one of the biggest tax savings when it comes to properties, as I'm sure you probably already know. How does it work with joint rentals, vacation spots for family? Not quite sure what you mean by joint rentals, as in like you own it with somebody else? If you own the property with somebody else, whoever's name is really on the deed, they're going to need to file it on their taxes. So whoever owns it needs to claim it on their taxes and claim the income and the losses from it. Okay, cool. So hopefully that answers your questions. Yes. So yeah, you can definitely claim on your tax your income, and you should claim your income and all of your expenses as well, whether it's a second home or whether it's classified an investment property. The classifications I'm talking about were really just for financing purposes. It's for the purpose of getting the loan, right? But when you come to show it on your taxes, you're going to show that this property brought me this much income, right? And here were my expenses. And the idea of getting a second home loan is really just to have a lower down payment requirement, 10% versus 20 to 25%. That's really the only benefit for you getting a second home loan. Now, there's a benefit of getting an investment loan is that you don't have to worry about all those restrictions. And then also you can use the rent that comes in from it to when the lender calculates your finances. Correct. So you'd have to be able to afford the mortgage without any revenue to the bank if you're using a second home loan. Yes, your current financials would have to be able to afford that, because when you're getting a second home loan, you're telling the bank, hey, I have a house, but I'm purchasing a second house to use as like a family vacation house. It's for me, right? And that's how the lender looks at it. So when you're getting a second home loan, the lender doesn't look at it as that the fact that there's income coming in. They just look at it as you're buying it. So you have to have the money to do that, or the income per se to do that. If you own two homes already, then you just get an investment property. You can still get a residential loan, and it's an investment property. And depending on the lender, will require 20 to 25%. You can also get a commercial loan. That's another avenue. Commercial loan usually will also require 20 to 25%. The interest rate is going to be slightly higher on a commercial loan. I would say maybe at least 1% or 1.5% higher than a residential loan. And but the benefit of a commercial loan is that it's not going to go on your record. It's not going to go on your DTI, right? So you can get commercial loans, and if you or your family then go buy something for yourself, that commercial loan, they're not going to even see that or calculate that. Other questions, folks? Yeah, I mean, the financing piece is probably one of the biggest pieces. You have to figure out what kind of financing you want to use, and that really depends on your situation, what loans you currently have, what are you looking to do in the short term for yourself, your family, your properties, and kind of make that determination from there. Yeah, so good question. What percentage do you calculate for stuff like sheets, replacements, and all that stuff? That's a good question. I don't necessarily have a particular calculation or percentage for that. So what I like to do is have like a reserve set aside as to how much it's going to take to set up the house for rent. So obviously, when you buy a home, just as with any home, you have your down payment costs, and then you have closing costs. Closing costs come to about 5 to 7% on average. So if you're paying 10% down payment plus 5% closing costs, that's 15% right there. It depends on the condition of the house, if you're buying it furnished or not furnished, how much furniture you need in it, how much space do you need to fill. All of that could really have a range, but I think I like to be at around under 10 grand as far as setting up the house. So your down payment, your closing cost, plus another 10 grand to set the house up. I don't like to go over that, but for some properties it might need. So definitely have those calculated upfront. And then the rest just kind of pays for itself. So as you bring money in, you can replace the things you need to replace. You can fix the things you need to fix, things like that. And once you make the initial purchase, then you know how much everything costs for that home, right? You know how much you spent on mattresses, you know how much you spent on pillows, how much you spent on sheets, how much you spent on X, Y, and Z. So if you have a list of all of that, then you know what your replacement costs are going to be. Airbnb overseas. Yeah, I think it's the same thing. You know, if the property is already being rented, ask for those rental history or those numbers. Also utilize AirDNA. Also look at Airbnb and VRBO to see how much properties are being rented for in that area, what their nightly rate is, what their calendar looks like, and all of that. And as far as, and if you're talking about purchase comps, then kind of the same thing, right? Using the MLS or whatever search tool to see properties nearby, how much they sold for, or how much properties are active right now, how much they are listed for. So you definitely do have to do comps on that. Which brings me to a great point. I think one big piece of advice that I tell people, especially as they're starting out with investing in Airbnb, is that don't buy the property just based on the rental income. Now, some people do, and that's fine. The issue is, what if that community or that township or that county, whatever, they decide to ban short-term rentals? Then you no longer have that rental income to leverage to sell that property. And if the purpose of that property is for you to rent it, then you no longer have a need for that property and you're going to sell it. But if you bought it at such high of a price because it brings in a lot of rent, then you might lose money on the sell. So I tell people, don't just buy it based on the rental income, but buy it based on the property value itself. If someone or a family was coming to buy that property for themselves to live in it, how much would they be willing to pay for it? So actually, we had to sell a property once. We bought a property, we started renting it, and the community, they didn't shut it down, but the community was not really friendly. There was a lot of complaints coming. We were getting a lot of fines because the board did not like the fact that there are short-term rentals. Now, they didn't have any restrictions against them. They didn't ban them, but there were noise violations and fines. So they kept fining us. And after some time, we just got tired of it and we decided to sell the property. But we bought the property at a good price that we actually sold it for higher than what we bought it for. So we made money off the sale, in addition to the rent money we made during the time that we held the property. So it worked out for us, right, in that sense. And that's another thing I think when I'm talking about regulations with HOAs, you want to try to find areas that are friendly to short-term rentals. And what do I mean by that is that if a community has a whole packet on rules and regulations of short-term rentals, if the community already has a process of short-term rentals, more so I think the biggest piece is if a community makes money off short-term rentals, then they're incentivized to have more rentals, and they're incentivized to cooperate with the owners and landlords of those rentals because there's money in it for them, right? So if a community has a process, has rules and regulations, and is incentivized for the rentals, then that's usually a good location to be in. Also the history, right? You want to kind of get an idea of the history of that area, how well short-term rentals do, and all of that stuff. But there's always the risk of things changing, and no one has a crystal ball to see if things change or not. Relationships with HOAs and towns is helpful as well. And sometimes if you don't have a relationship, just picking up the phone and calling and asking questions to the HOA folks or the township administration folks to kind of see what's coming up, any decisions that are being made, and kind of keeping up on those things to know what's coming up. Yeah, so is there a calculator? I mean, I just kind of run the numbers, and it's very basic. I do have some documents, but I don't have it handy that I can share it right now. But basically, taking a look at how much can I rent this property for throughout the year, like what am I expecting to make as far as revenue, then kind of subtracting all my costs from it, and seeing what that net profit looks like, and does it meet the number that I'm looking for or does it not, right? So on a property that's around 300 grand, probably I'm looking to make at least 20 or 30 grand in net profit per year on it. So it depends what your number is and what you're satisfied with, and then kind of work the numbers. And if it makes those numbers, then it makes sense, right? And if you budget conservatively, hopefully your property will outperform your predictions, which has been my experience. And I can probably share something with you or put something together just because of like an easy Excel sheet to kind of calculate those stuff. Maybe I'll list out all of the costs that I mentioned earlier here today. Cool. All right, folks, other questions? Let me ask you, was this helpful? Did you guys get some helpful information out of this? I hope so. Like I said, guys, there's a lot of information, right? This is years of knowledge. This is hours and hours of research, of going places, checking out properties, evaluating properties, buying, selling properties, talking with HOA folks, talking with township folks, all kind of officials. So there's a lot that went into this as far as the knowledge. Obviously, it can be condensed into an hour presentation, but hopefully some of this information was helpful, and hopefully I can do more content regarding this topic. And if any of you have questions, post them in the group or feel free to message me. I'm more than happy to help anyone there. Cool. Anything else? Going once, going twice. Who wants to buy that property I showed you guys? Cool. All right, Jose, Charlie, are you guys coming in? Or I think I saw Charlie come in there for a second.
What's up, guys? You hear me? Good. All right. Any questions, Charlie, for me, for Mena? I mean, I'm really a moderator at this point, and excuse the headphones.
Nah, I'm gonna run some numbers by you guys.
Okay.
We're the eagle ones. It's crazy. It's like we're preaching to the people that preach.
Seriously. Hey, Mena, Oscar wants to see that property again. I think if you want, let's pull it up. Fuck it.
Yeah. Oscar, why don't you message me and I'll actually email it to you. Am I mute? No. You guys can hear me, right? All right. Yeah. I think I tried to share it. I don't know if you can see it or not, but yeah, Oscar, I think just remind me, even like Facebook message, and I can email you the link of that specific property itself. And this is just one property I looked up right before we start, just to kind of show you guys as an example, right? And considering that this property is already being rented, one of the first things that I would do is automatically reach out to the seller or their agent and get pretty much the rental history from it, right? Then if those numbers look good, I'd go and check out the property in person, put in the offer that I think makes sense, and kind of go from there, right? But that's a very desirable community, and it's in a great location. and is very short-term rental friendly. Actually, the township banned short-term rentals except for property in that community and another HOA. So in that township, there's only 2 communities that can provide short-term rentals, and this is one of those communities. Since we're still on, I'll mention other things because I do these presentations for other groups, and a lot of times it's really based on the questions that they have. So I think another big thing is what kind of property are you looking for? Like what kind of features are you looking for? For example, if you're looking for a property with a pool, pools bring in a lot of revenue, right? People love rent properties with pools. Now, because of that demand, there is not too many properties with pools for sale. So you're going to be paying a lot to get a property with a pool, but your rent is going to offset that, right? Especially if you have an indoor pool, then that's a gold mine right there. But you're going to be paying a lot more than the price you see here. Right? This is a fairly small house, square footage wise, right? It's less than 2,000 square feet, so it's not that big. But it's a 4-bedroom, so you can fit 10 people in it. And if you do the numbers should work out right. You're going to bring in 80 or more grand from this property. Your costs on it, mortgage wise, is 24. So right there, you're looking at, and I'm just going to do basic math. Knock the mortgage off, you're at 55 grand. Knock the cleaning fees and the maintenance off. You're still looking at 30 grand or so a year on this property conservatively, right? Probably even more if you do your numbers right. If you operate it correctly, this property can bring you in roughly around that per year net, and that's not including obviously the equity that you're building in the property, right? So the calculation actually looks a little different. When I sit down and look at the calculation, I calculate the property expenses first and see what the net income is. And then I subtract my debt services, which is my financing, to see essentially what the cash flow is, right? I think I might have did this in the last presentation, but in rental properties, you want to look at your gross operating income. Then you subtract all the property expenses, not including your financing. And that gives you your net operating income. Then you subtract your debt services, basically your mortgage and whatever, then that gives you the cash flow of that property. But I think you already know that, Oscar. Cool. Anything else, folks? Cool. I hope this was helpful. Hopefully you guys got some stuff out of it. Again, anyone that needs help of any questions, anything I can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I'd love to be of any help that I can. All right, I'm good. Charlie or Jose, if you guys want to jump in and close it out, you guys can go ahead and do that.
Now I want to thank you again, Mena, for being so generous with your time.
Man, anytime.
Hello.
How do I share my
Hi,
screen?
how are you? Good. How are you? Having a beer?
Can you guys see this? No, right? I'm not sharing it.
Yeah. Sure.
No, thanks, Mike. Thank you.